Hey, good morning. Today is another one of our first fives. We're looking at this passage from Luke chapter 22, beginning with verse 39. But I have a question kind of as we get started and look at this text today. What's your goal today? What are you trying to accomplish? What do you feel like is your purpose this day? I think Jesus gives a line in this prayer he's praying the night before he's executed. This prayer, I think, should in many ways be the prayer we pray daily. And I think if we prayed it daily, we might know what our purpose is every single day. And so here's what happens. Verse 39. Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down, and prayed, "Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. When he rose from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow. "Why are you sleeping?" he asked them. "Get up and pray so that you will not fall into temptation." Now, there's several things that happen in this text. Now, let's mention a couple. Jesus goes about a stone's throw away. So how far can I throw a stone? Well, even if you have an incredible arm, it's not that far, right? If you're a Major League Baseball player, maybe you can throw it from center field to home plate. That's 400 feet. That's about as far as anyone can throw a baseball. So a stone, you're not throwing any further than that. So they're not that far away from Jesus. And yet he goes off to pray, and he's praying with such earnestness that he's sweating, right? I know sometimes we'll say, well, he's bleeding. No. He was sweating, and it was like drops of blood because it was so big, such big drops, and it was such fervent prayer. But I want to come back to what he's praying and what he tells us to pray. So he tells the people to pray to not fall into temptation. And then he goes and prays. He says, "Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." So here's Jesus' purpose in life. He wants to do the will of his Father. It's literally his purpose for living. And he says to the disciples, basically, while they're falling into temptation, while they're falling asleep, and I get it. I've been so tired praying that I woke up and go, oh, it was a really good prayer time today, right? But here's the thing for us. Maybe what we'd find is if we sought after God's will, not just our own desires, that we wouldn't have to worry about the temptations in the world around us. The temptation would become for us such a secondary issue because we're so wrapped up in God's love for us and living out of that love. And so there's a few things I think that are helpful for us to know. What does it look like to be God's unique people? And so I think we go back and we can look at just the book of Matthew, in Matthew chapter 4. Jesus says, "Come and follow me." Okay, so what's God's will for us? That we follow Jesus. And then again in Matthew chapter, I'm going to forget now, it's 22 or 23, Jesus says, "Love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself." So I'm going to follow Jesus. I'm going to love God and love my neighbor as myself. And then in Matthew chapter 28, Jesus says, "Go and make disciples." And so what's God's will for us? We follow Jesus, that we love him and love others, that we would go and make disciples. So here's the thing for us. If we would live from those perspectives, we would know God's will for us. We wouldn't have to worry about falling into temptation. And the truth is, just like Jesus, there may be times in which we recognize what God's desire is for us to live in a part of his kingdom on earth. It is going to be difficult. It's going to be a hard task. But if we've been following Jesus, if we've been loving God and loving others, if we're going to make disciples, we'll find that we are sufficiently restored and ready to go, and it's something we're able to do. And so the question for you and I each morning is, what's our purpose? Well, our purpose is simple. Follow Jesus. Follow him. Love God, love others, and go and make disciples. And then we know we're living in what God's will for us is. We're living what God's desire for our lives are. And the temptations become secondary issues because we're living from the place God has called us. And so if you want to know what you're called to, that's what you're called to. May you and I live as a people who know our calling, know what God has for us, know what he desires for us. And may we find that we're like Jesus, that when those moments, God sufficiently supplies all that we need. Even if we're uncertain, even if we're afraid, he is present with us and he offers us enough. And we know that because this same Jesus, who's crucified just a day later, resurrected, and the same spirit that raised Christ from the dead is the same spirit that can live in us. And so may you find that the Spirit of God that is present with you is more than enough. We'll catch you next time for another First Five.